such a unique entity within. Oh, that didn't last long.
Number 15, the Nasty Boys. A presumed forever shulled upon Jerry Saggs' '97 exit from WCW, the Nasty Boys shot back to relevancy for anyone who was still watching TNA in 2010, even if there wasn't a lot of them, as they joined the congregation of WWE cast-offs hired to appease Hulk Hogan. Hogan was fond of Saggs and Brian Knobbs, though not fond enough to save them from the sack. They were released from their TNA contracts after less than 3 months. But in 2007, 3 years before their embarrassing TNA stint, Knobbs and Saggs had a somehow much more embarrassing run. Returning to WWE, they wrestled Dave Taylor and Drew McIntyre in an untelevised tryout, the match being designed to test the waters for a Ruthless Aggression Nasty Boys reunion. It failed. The Nasties were overly stiff, stagnant, and senseless. The icing on the cake came from when they botched their already illogical double-team finisher. They were let go from WWE the next day as not even Vince McMahon, the same man who thought Bob Backlund was hot property in 2000, wanted anything to do with the Golden Era duo. Number 14, the Headbangers. Splitting up the Tag Team Championships in 2016 to accompany a rehashed brand split concept presented WWE with its most oblivious issue. They had few credible tag teams to actually hold now 2 sets of double titles. So few, in fact, that the tournament to crown SmackDown's inaugural tag team champions ran out of established pairings before the first round. They needed backup. They needed an incentive for fans to actually care about the tournament and the new blue straps. They needed the Headbangers. Yeah, the Headbangers. The same guys who spent their 16 years absent from WWE being bashed by the company for not being the New Age Outlaws. Returning for a 3-match spat, but it's probably one of the most least memorable returns of all time. Number 13, D'Lo Brown. D'Lo Brown, a can't-miss wrestler from the Attitude Era whose career peaked when he became a simultaneous Intercontinental and European champion. But when he was brought back to WWE in 2008, it wasn't such a great return. The reason for Brown's brief WWE revival was simple. He had worked in Japan. Vince McMahon was obsessed with anyone who dared learn the Japanese style of wrestling upon their exit from WWE. Brown in turn worked stiffer matches. His return versus Santino Marella of all people featured a particularly gnarly sliding shoulder tackle that looked every bit as vicious as a Gunther chop. Unfortunately though, it wasn't to be for D'Lo Brown in WWE's PG era. He was jobbing to Snitsky, Jamie Noble, Manu, Lance Cade, and Charlie Haas by the year's end, lasting just 6 months under an official WWE contract. It was a pointless return and, like the Headbangers in 2016, was executed with the sole purpose of eliciting a seismic Attitude Era level reaction. Well, it didn't. Number 12, Emma. Was Paul Triple H Levesque actually a good head of creative for WWE in 2022, or did he just rehire everyone whom Vince McMahon fired to make himself look good? Indeed, everyone returned to WWE between July and December 2022. Karrion Kross, Johnny Gargano, Candice LeRae, Dakota Kai, Hit Row, Bronson Reed, then Emma. You'd be forgiven for not recalling a return from exile. Answering Ronda Rousey's open challenge that October, the Aussie was a pristine example of how to add depth to a roster bloated with megastars. She wasn't exactly must-see, but she nailed the fundamentals and could carry a solid match. But against Ronda, she looked lost and uncomfortable. It wasn't an inspired comeback, nor did it open the door for anything enthralling before Emma was released once again. It's believed that the most notable highlight of her second run was the way in which she announced the departure, quote-tweeting WWE's announcement of the 2024 Elimination Chamber heading to Perth by calling it a dream to make it onto the card. Emma quote-tweeted that to announce her exit. Number 11, Tegan Nox. Now, if you think Emma had a forgettable WWE comeback, then cast your eyes upon Tegan Nox, who had a return so forgettable that many weren't aware that she'd even been released, instead assuming that WWE, as was often the case, had nothing for her. Cut from the company in November 2021 and returning in December 2022, the Welsh woman showed no promise upon returning, despite being thrown a bone in the form of a makeshift alliance with Liv Morgan. That was Tegan's typecast in WWE. Put her in a meaningless tag team, have them do absolutely nothing, break them up, rinse and repeat. It didn't work, and it couldn't work. Re-released in November 2024, Nixon Newell, as she was again called, returned to the independent circuit without the buzz and appeal that commonly follows WWE mass releases. She worked just 12 matches since, none of which have been for a major promotion, which best summarizes her disaster of a second WWE stint. Number 10, Kevin Nash. 8th July 2002. That is the night Kevin Nash's career died. That is a bold take, obviously, but it rings hollow when assessing Nash's legacy after his match that night, partnering with Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, X-Pac, and The Big Show to defeat Rob Van Dam, Booker T, Goldust, and Bubba Ray and Spike Dudley made for a strange lineup. But that isn't what fans were discussing. They were talking about the freak injury served to Big Daddy Cool. Big booting Booker T, Nash then went to steamroll T's corner, but instead, he tripped on Booker's ankle, colliding awkwardly with Bubba Ray and falling to the floor in a heap. The diagnosis? A torn quadricep. Nash on his Click This podcast described the feeling in his knee as like a shotgun going off. It felt like a shotgun. It felt like somebody... anybody that's ever torn an ACL, like, magnify that times... your ACL is, like that. You fucking... you could feel it go... as you're going down, you could just feel it rip, and then I went down and went... Bubba was really cool because Bubba like bent over me and he was talking to me and I said, "Listen, I think it's my fucking knee." And he said, "You know what?" And I'm pulling on it right there to see if it's snug. The heartening aspect is that this was Kevin's first match in 4 months after having recovered from a biceps injury suffered in March, itself coming just a month after he and Scott Hall and Hulk Hogan had returned to WWE. Whilst we wouldn't put the injury as hilarious, it was more depressing than anything else, and one which marred Nash's legacy until his 2017 retirement. Number 9, King Kong Bundy and Nikolai Volkov. The King Kong Bundy was semi-retired and Nikolai Volkov was on his way there. Of course, WWE offered them both a gig. They were recklessly thrown into supporting roles within Ted DiBiase's million-dollar corporation stable. Bundy as a right-hand enforcer, and Volkov as a surprisingly sympathetic babyface, forced to do DiBiase's dirty work, following the very real collapse of the Soviet Union. Neither man impressed. Bundy was an immobile buffoon whose squash matches often made his victims look like the star he was supposed to be, while Nikolai afforded the chance to display a new style in his new position, that probably being the toupee that he was wearing. The new generation era exposed both men's weaknesses. They can no longer get by on just effective character work. Audiences definitely expected more, especially for a man the size of King Kong Bundy. The Undertaker and Diesel had proven to be compelling in-ring giants, establishing the new style that had to be adopted for workers of their ilk. Bundy received the memo, but he failed to adapt his wrestling style, leading to an incredibly awful run. This was a man who once main-evented WrestleMania with Hulk Hogan. Number 8, The Good Brothers. Vince McMahon didn't particularly like the Good Brothers. He didn't particularly like anyone, but he especially didn't like anyone who carved out their career outside the WWE. Signing them, AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura away from New Japan Pro Wrestling in 2016, McMahon booked Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson as cannon fodder for John Cena to dismantle, pretend scientists analyzing Big E's testicles, and capped off their wavy WWE debut year with a victory of the Raw Tag Team Championships at the Royal Rumble on the pre-show. It didn't scan as anything of note, and it remained that way until they were released from WWE in April of 2020, approximately a week after they had their careers quite literally buried by The Undertaker at WrestleMania 36. Triple H didn't particularly like the Good Brothers either, bringing them back in October 2022 because, again, he just brought back everyone who was contractually available. The game did precisely nothing with Gallows and Anderson. They were involved in an on-and-off-again partnership with AJ Styles, were relegated to NXT after that failed, and then they were subtly binned in February 2025, where their post-WWE careers have remained. Number 7, The Ultimate Warrior. Jim Ross, a legendary voice of wrestling and WWE's former Executive Vice President of Talent Relations, brilliantly described Vince McMahon's harebrained decision to rehire the Warrior in '96. We had great expectations that magic could be reproduced, reverting back to the old days or the heyday of the Warrior. There could have been things done in the ring, an interview segment, or just admit that he's hurt and that he's can't be cleared, whatever. There's a million ways to get around that. That's a non-issue to me. And safe to say, WWE did not relive the original magic of the Ultimate Warrior. Not even close. The Warrior returned against Hunter Hearst Helmsley at WrestleMania 12. This was not the same Ultimate Warrior that fans have been infatuated with. No, this isn't a reference to the supposed Warrior doppelganger who saved Hulk Hogan 4 years later at WrestleMania 8. This is a reference to the very fact that the Warrior either could not or would not care. He founded every performance as if it were a greatest hits package. Shoulder tackle, gorilla press, big splash. Done for the evening. Fans needed more in this era, and they weren't going to get it from an aging Warrior, injured or not. During this run, Warrior didn't even appear at some shows that he was even booked to be on. Number 6, Brian Christopher. Now, rather this was one of the most disastrous returns in a sense, it was one of the most saddest returns in WWE history. Brian Grandmaster Sexay received a muted reception from an audience who had viewed him as a rock star just 10 years earlier. Indeed, Christopher, the legitimate son of Jerry the King Lawler, was rolled out by WWE during Jerry's horrific feud with Michael Cole, siding with Cole while he was branded as a bigger screw-up than Charlie Sheen by his supposedly babyface father. It was eerily silent when he emerged, each beat of the iconic Too Cool music being heard as Christopher performed his and Scotty 2 Hotty's full dance routine. Doing so without the backing track of 14,000 screaming fans made the entrance one of WWE's most awkward, painful, and joyless moments. The former tag team champion was brought back twice in 2014 alongside Scotty and Rikishi for various Too Cool reunions, and just as well he was there. On this occasion, he was received as a superstar he had portrayed throughout the Attitude Era. Still, this 2011 comeback lives on in infamy. Number 5. Eva Marie. Now, if you want the short version, Eva Marie was horrific. If you want the long version, Eva Marie was signed to WWE by chance, failed to develop even an ounce of wrestling ability despite having full access to a world-class training facility and coaches. She left the company, resurfaced after 4 years having still failed to develop her skills as a pro wrestler. She did literally nothing other than get demolished by Piper Niven and Shayna Baszler, and was cut from the company again in November 2021. It isn't hyperbole to brandish Marie as one of the worst wrestlers in WWE history. She really was that bad. While Vince McMahon chose her, of all people, to re-sign while embarking on a slew of regular roster cullings, is a theory that will forever remain without an explanation. Number 4. The British Bulldog. To many, the British Bulldog was a hero. He did the unthinkable at SummerSlam 92 when he ripped the Intercontinental Championship away from Bret Hart in the main event at Wembley Stadium, the first time a British performer had achieved such a feat. His matches were regularly good, not great. He didn't have the drawing power that someone like Bret Hart did, but it didn't matter. Bulldog represented at the time an unrepresented nation who were going back to him no matter the situation. But his 1999 return literally ruined everything. Admittedly, this was the Englishman working at a reduced ability. A spinal infection that was a result of landing awkwardly on the mat in WCW left him without the same spark that he once had. He appeared only to be in the game for a quick payday while he could get one. While also evidently abusing steroids, he was always a hulking individual. By 99, he was nearing Hulk Hogan levels of mass. This run lasted just a few months before he departed again in May 2000. Number 3. Bret Hart. Bret Hart revolutionized the style of pro wrestling you see today. He understood the psychology of the medium, he knew the best manner into which to execute spots, and crucially, he knew how to combine the two. Returning to WWE in January of 2010 to draw a truce with Shawn Michaels, the Hitman was soon scheduled for a return to the ring. He was to face Vince McMahon in an all-falls barred match. But despite the obviously heated aura of the storyline, you may recall that Hart did nothing from bell to bell. He beat the chairman about with a tire iron and ended the match angle with a sharpshooter, leading the extended Hart family to disfigure McMahon. Now, there was one problem with Bret's wrestling return. His insurance policy with Lloyd's of London forbade him from doing anything in the ring. They had caught on to other wrestlers claiming insurance for career-ending injuries before eventually resuming in-ring activities, and were hesitant to allow the match between Bret and Vince to go ahead before giving in, though with his insurance company closely monitoring the situation. Compare this pay-per-view showdown with a Bret match from his live event loop, and it's day and night in terms of how he wrestled, given the lack of attention to the latter. Number 2. Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels should have remained forever retired after WrestleMania 26. It was a perfect wrestling retirement and allowed Michaels to spend more time with his family, specifically his then 9-year-old son Cameron, but the itch to wrestle again was too much. Well as a Saudi Arabian payday as something he just couldn't pass up. Reuniting D-Generation X with Triple H versus the Brothers of Destruction of Kane and The Undertaker, the match was one of the worst of all time. Everything went wrong. Kane's mask fell off, Triple H tore his pectoral muscle minutes into the match, The Undertaker was going through the motions, and Shawn was well past it. He struggled. He wrestled as if he hadn't trained since retiring, which may have been true. He certainly hadn't reminded himself of how to safely moonsault to the floor. Making this worse is the knowledge that Michaels could have returned earlier than 2018 in situations where his opponents could have dragged at least a 3-star match out of him. Dream matches opposite AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan, the latter which had been teased as relatively possible in late 2013, would have been good, maybe even great. But instead, we got this, whatever this was supposed to be. And number 1, Ronda Rousey. Now everything changed when Ronda Rousey joined WWE's payroll at the 2018 Rumble. A legitimate shoot fighter, Ronda brought the exact style to WWE, offering a change of pace from the company's usual output that resulted in her debut match being instantly praised as one of the greatest firsts in pro wrestling. It was truly memorizing. Ronda cared, and it showed. However, everything changed when she came back to the WWE in the 2022 Royal Rumble. Ronda had taken to bad-mouthing fans on social